A mid-air humiliation leaves a dedicated flight attendant on the brink of breaking down until a surprising intervention changes everything. What happens when a global icon steps in to restore dignity and order at 30,000 feet? Before diving into this unforgettable story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that reveal the power of resilience and kindness. Monica adjusted her navy blue scarf with practiced precision, her reflection staring back at her from the cramped crew restroom mirror. The bathroom smelled faintly of sanitizer and coffee, a familiar mix after 10 years in the skies. She smoothed her pressed white blouse, pulled her lips into a smile, and muttered, "You got this, Monica." Another day, another flight. Walking out of the restroom, Monica immediately felt the buzz of pre-flight energy in the terminal. Travelers shuffled through the crowded gate, some clutching Starbucks cups, others typing furiously on laptops. Families corralled toddlers, and the steady hum of announcements crackled overhead. Gate 15's boarding sign flashed: Flight 1823 Los Angeles to New York. Monica strode toward her crew, her heels clicking confidently despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted her colleague and friend, James, already managing the line of passengers with his trademark charm. James, a tall man with an easy smile, waved her over. "Ready for today's circus?" he asked with a smirk. "Always," Monica replied. She glanced at the boarding list James handed her, noting a few high-profile names in first class. "Tom Hanks," she said, raising an eyebrow. James grinned. "You never know who you'll meet in this job." Monica chuckled, but her mind drifted. She couldn't let herself get too caught up in the celebrity passenger. She had more pressing concerns. Rent was due next week, and her sister had texted earlier about needing help with her college tuition. As much as Monica loved her job, it didn't pay enough to solve everyone's problems. As the passengers boarded, Monica slipped into her routine. "Good morning. Welcome aboard," she said with a bright smile to each passenger, whether they offered a polite nod or ignored her entirely. She had perfected the art of letting indifference roll off her back. Near the end of boarding, a man approached a well-dressed white businessman in his late 40s. He wore a crisp suit and carried an air of entitlement. Monica greeted him with the same warmth she gave everyone else, but he barely looked at her. As he passed her to take his seat, she heard him mutter under his breath, "Hired for diversity points, I guess." Her heart clenched. She had heard comments like this before. Sometimes blatant, sometimes whispered just loud enough to sting. She took a deep breath, pushing the words aside. She couldn't afford to react. She wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction. James caught her eye from the other end of the cabin. He raised an eyebrow, silently asking if she was okay. She gave him a subtle nod. The flight attendants completed their checks, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. Monica took her place for the safety demonstration. She moved through the motions effortlessly, though her mind buzzed with the man's comment. As the plane lifted off, Monica forced herself to focus on her duties. She walked the aisle, checking seat belts and assisting passengers. A little girl with pigtails waved at her, and Monica smiled back, her spirits lifting slightly. She reminded herself why she did this job: because she loved helping people, loved being a part of their journeys. Still, as the plane reached cruising altitude, her earlier confidence felt thinner. She could feel the businessman's eyes on her from time to time, his presence a shadow over her thoughts. Monica squared her shoulders and focused on what lay ahead. It was a long flight, and she wasn't going to let one man ruin it. She glanced toward first class, where Tom Hanks sat, smiling kindly at the flight attendant offering him water. Maybe this flight wouldn't be so bad after all. Little did Monica know, the journey ahead would test her resolve in ways she never imagined. Monica busied herself in the galley, carefully arranging drinks on the cart. She appreciated the predictability of this part of the job: soda cans in neat rows, ice cubes rattling in their bucket. It was comforting, a moment of quiet focus amid the usual chaos of the cabin. "Need a hand?" James asked, appearing beside her. His easygoing demeanor was a balm, as always. "I've got it," Monica said, flashing him a quick smile. "But keep an eye on 12A, will you? He's already on my radar." James's expression darkened slightly. "What did he say?" Monica hesitated, debating whether to brush it off or share the man's earlier comment. "Nothing worth repeating," she finally said, her tone light but her grip tightening on the edge of the cart. James studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but let me know if he steps out of line. Monica appreciated his support but hoped she wouldn't need it. She couldn't let one difficult passenger derail her professionalism. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the cart out into the aisle and began her service. The cabin was alive with the sounds of travel, the low hum of engines, the rustle of newspapers, the quiet beeping of laptops. Passengers politely asked for their drinks, and Monica moved seamlessly through the rows, her friendly demeanor never faltering. When she reached 12A, the businessman barely looked up from his tablet. "Diet Coke," he said curtly, as though she were an automated vending machine. Monica handed him the can with a practiced smile. "You're welcome," she said softly, though he hadn't thanked her. As she continued down the aisle, a sudden commotion from 12A caught her attention. Monica turned just in time to see the businessman toss the unopened Diet Coke onto the tray table with exaggerated force. It rolled, clattering loudly. "What's the problem, sir?" Monica asked, keeping her voice calm despite the knot tightening in her stomach. "This isn't what I ordered," he snapped, gesturing toward the can. "I said regular Coke, not Diet. Are you even listening?" Monica blinked, caught off guard by his aggression. "I apologize, sir. I'll get you a regular Coke right away." She bent to retrieve another can from her cart, her hands steady despite the heat rising in her chest. When she handed him the correct drink, he leaned back in his seat with a theatrical sigh. "Maybe if they hired people who could actually pay attention, we wouldn't have these problems," he muttered loudly enough for the nearby passengers to hear. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. A few passengers exchanged uneasy glances, and one older woman in the row across from him frowned in disapproval. Monica's pulse quickened, but she forced a serene expression. "Is there anything else I can get for you, sir?" she asked evenly. He smirked, as though daring her to react. "No, just try to get it right next time." Monica moved on, her practiced smile firmly in place, but her heart was pounding, and she felt the sting of tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. She couldn't let him see her falter. Not here, not now. Back in the galley, she took a moment to steady herself, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. James appeared again, his brow furrowed. "What happened?" he asked. Monica shook her head. "It's fine. Just a difficult passenger." James's lips pressed into a thin line. "You shouldn't have to put up with that." "It's part of the job," Monica said, though the words felt hollow even as she said them. She wiped her hands on her apron and took another deep breath. "Let's just keep going." But the incident wasn't over. A few rows back, a woman seated next to 12 spoke up. "You know," she said loudly, addressing the businessman, "you don't have to be rude. She's doing her job." The man turned to her with an icy glare. "Mind your own business," he snapped. "I will, once you learn some manners," the woman shot back. Her voice was calm but firm, and a few passengers murmured their agreement. The businessman's face flushed. "This isn't your concern." The exchange drew attention, passengers craning their necks to see what was happening. Monica quickly stepped in, placing herself between the two. "Let's all take a deep breath," she said, her tone measured. "Sir, if you need anything else, please let me know. Otherwise, I'd appreciate it if we could all keep the cabin calm." The businessman's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Monica nodded to the woman in thanks before returning to the galley, her nerves frayed. She leaned against the counter, letting out a shaky breath. Just as she was gathering herself, a warm voice broke through her thoughts. "Excuse me," she looked up to see Tom Hanks standing in the galley entrance, his expression kind but concerned. "I couldn't help but notice. Are you all right?" Monica's composure nearly cracked. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady. "Just a little turbulence, that's all." Tom smiled gently. "Well, if you need a co-pilot to smooth things out, let me know." His words, simple but sincere, felt like a lifeline. Monica nodded, her gratitude unspoken but deeply felt. Little did she know, this moment was only the beginning of what would unfold. The plane hummed steadily at cruising altitude, but inside Monica's mind, the air was turbulent. She replayed the businessman's dismissive comments, the standoff with the other passenger, and the curious stares of the rest of the cabin. She hated feeling like a spectacle, like her professionalism was unraveling in front of everyone. James passed by and squeezed her shoulder. "Hang in there," he whispered. Monica nodded, grateful for his solidarity. But her resolve was wearing thin. She couldn't shake the nagging thought that, no matter how hard she tried, moments like these would follow her like an unavoidable stain on her otherwise polished exterior. She had just stepped out of the galley, preparing to take drink orders for first class, when she spotted the businessman again. He was now leaning back in his seat, speaking loudly enough for several rows to hear. "Unbelievable," he said to no one in particular, gesturing toward the back of the plane. "You'd think they'd hire people who knew what they were doing. Standards really have dropped, haven't they?" Monica paused mid-step, her fingers tightening around the notepad in her hand. A few passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances, their faces reflecting everything from irritation to disbelief. One young man across the aisle from 12 leaned forward, as if to say something, but then thought better of it. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet. Monica considered letting it go, just walking past as though she hadn't heard. But before she could move, another voice broke the silence. Sir Tom Hanks's voice carried from his seat in first class, steady but firm. "That's enough." The businessman turned sharply, his smug expression faltering for a moment as he registered the source of the interruption. A murmur of recognition rippled through the cabin. Passengers sat up straighter, their attention now riveted on the scene. "Excuse me," the businessman said, his tone tinged with incredulity. Tom stood and stepped into the aisle, his movements unhurried yet commanding. He adjusted his blazer and gestured calmly toward Monica. "I think she's doing an excellent job. In fact, I'd say she's handled this entire flight with a level of grace and professionalism that not many people could muster. Don't you agree?" The businessman blinked, caught off guard. "Well, he started, but Tom raised a hand gently to stop him. "We're all passengers here," Tom continued, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had charmed audiences for decades. "We're all trying to get where we're going safely and comfortably. Why make that harder for anyone, especially the people working to make our journey smoother?" A smattering of applause broke out from the rows nearby. Monica stood frozen, her notepad forgotten in her hand. She wanted to step in, to thank Tom, to diffuse the moment somehow, but it was as if her voice had been swallowed by the weight of her emotions. The businessman shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly flustered. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it," he mumbled, his tone suddenly subdued. "Good," Tom said, nodding once. "Then maybe we can all settle in and enjoy the rest of the flight." He turned back toward Monica, his expression softening. "And if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." The cabin seemed to exhale as Tom returned to his seat, the tension melting away like ice on a sunny day. Passengers smiled at Monica as she passed, some murmuring words of encouragement. "You're doing great," a woman in 14 billion said warmly. "Don't let that guy get to you," added a teenager in 15C. By the time Monica reached first class, her steps felt lighter. Tom gave her a small, knowing smile as she approached with the drink cart. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice thick with gratitude. "It's the least I could do," he replied. "You're handling this with a lot of dignity. More than most people would." Monica blinked back tears as she served him his requested sparkling water. She felt a renewed sense of determination settle over her. Maybe she couldn't control how people treated her, but she could control how she responded. And today she would finish this flight with her head held high. Still, as she moved back down the aisle, she couldn't shake the feeling that this incident wasn't entirely over. The businessman sat stiffly in his seat, his jaw tight and his gaze fixed out the window. His silence felt ominous, like a storm cloud lingering just over the horizon. Monica squared her shoulders. Whatever came next, she would be ready. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, but Monica couldn't shake the feeling that the calm was deceptive, like the eerie quiet before a thunderstorm. She continued her rounds, her professionalism firmly in place, though her mind buzzed with the weight of what had just unfolded. The businessman in 12 hadn't said another word, but his silence felt pointed, as though he were stewing in his own frustration. Every time Monica walked past his row, she could feel his eyes on her, heavy with unspoken resentment. "Hey," James whispered as they crossed paths near the galley. "You doing okay?" "I'm fine," Monica said automatically, though she wasn't sure it was entirely true. "Thanks for covering for me earlier." James nodded, concern etched across his face. "You let me know if he tries anything else." Monica offered a grateful smile, but as she turned back toward the cabin, the knot in her stomach tightened. She wasn't sure what she was bracing for, but she knew it wasn't over. The breaking point came during the meal service. Monica had just handed a tray to the passenger in 12 billion when 12 leaned into the aisle, his face set in a tight scowl. "Excuse me," he said, his voice cutting through the soft murmur of the cabin. "I think you've forgotten about me." Monica paused, startled. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll be with you in just a moment." "No, you'll deal with this now," he said, raising his voice slightly. The passengers around him looked up, their conversations halting. Monica took a steadying breath. "What seems to be the issue?" "The issue," he said, his tone dripping with disdain, "is that you've been ignoring me since this flight started. I paid for a first-class experience, and what I've gotten is subpar at best." Monica blinked, stunned by the accusation. "Sir, I assure you I've been doing my best to attend to all passengers equally." "Your best isn't good enough," he snapped. "Maybe this job isn't the right fit for you." A hush fell over the cabin. Monica felt every pair of eyes on her, the weight of their attention pressing down like a physical force. Her cheeks burned, but she refused to let her composure slip. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said evenly. "I'll do my best to address any concerns you have." The businessman smirked, leaning back in his seat with a smug air of victory. "See that you do." Before Monica could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Enough." It was Tom Hanks again, his tone quiet but commanding. He had stepped into the aisle, his presence a calm yet powerful force that immediately drew every eye. Sir Tom continued, addressing the businessman directly, "I think you've made your point. Now it's time to let it go." The businessman's smirk faded. "With all due respect," he said, his voice defensive, "this is none of your business." "With all due respect," Tom replied, his expression firm but not unkind, "it is everyone's business when someone is being mistreated. And that's exactly what you're doing." A few passengers murmured their agreement, their support rippling quietly through the cabin. The businessman shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his bravado visibly cracking. Tom turned slightly, addressing the rest of the cabin. "Let's remember that everyone here is just trying to get to their destination. There's no need to make someone else's job harder, especially someone who's working tirelessly to make our journey easier." The applause started slowly, scattered at first, then swelling to fill the cabin. Monica felt her throat tighten as the passengers around her clapped, their support washing over her like a wave. "Thank you," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible over the noise. Tom gave her a small nod, his expression warm. Then he turned back to the businessman, who now looked thoroughly uncomfortable. "I think it's time to move on," Tom said gently but firmly. "Don't you?" The businessman opened his mouth as if to argue but seemed to think better of it. He slumped back in his seat, muttering something under his breath, but he didn't say another word. Monica stood frozen for a moment, the tension draining from her body. She felt an overwhelming mix of gratitude and relief, but also something deeper: pride. Pride in herself for staying composed, and pride in the passengers who had rallied around her. As she returned to the galley, James was waiting for her. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I think so," Monica said, her voice shaky but steadying. "That was something." James grinned. "You handled it like a pro." Monica smiled back, a genuine warmth spreading through her. The rest of the flight still lay ahead, but for the first time since takeoff, she felt like she could breathe again. The cabin slowly settled back into a comfortable rhythm. Passengers resumed their conversations, the tension of the earlier confrontation fading like ripples on water. Monica took a moment in the galley to collect herself, her back against the counter, her hands trembling slightly as they clutched a bottle of water. She sipped, letting the coolness soothe her dry throat. "Hey," James said, stepping into the galley. He leaned casually against the opposite counter, but his expression was all concern. "You sure you're all right?" Monica nodded, though the tightness in her chest hadn't fully eased. I'm fine. It's just exhausting sometimes, you know. James nodded solemnly. You handled it with grace. Don't let that guy get to you. You've got a whole plane of people on your side. Monica smiled faintly. Yeah, I noticed. Tom Hanks is my unofficial PR rep, who'd have thought. James chuckled. Not a bad ally to have. As the flight continued, passengers went out of their way to show their support for Monica. The woman in 14 billion waved her over during the meal cleanup. I just wanted to say, you're amazing, she said, her voice warm with sincerity. I can't believe you kept your cool through all of that. Thank you, Monica replied, her smile more genuine now. It means a lot. Seriously, the woman continued, don't let people like that ruin your day. The rest of us appreciate you. Other passengers chimed in with similar sentiments as Monica moved through the cabin. A teenager offered her a fist bump. A mother with a toddler handed her a handwritten thank you note scrawled on the back of a napkin. Even the quiet man in 16D, who hadn't said a word all flight, gave her a thumbs up as she passed. The gestures, small as they were, built her confidence back up piece by piece. Monica began to feel like herself again, her steps lighter, her smile less forced. By the time the drink service for first class resumed, she felt ready to face anything. When she reached Tom Hanks's seat, he looked up from the book he was reading and smiled warmly. Everything all right now, he asked. Monica nodded. Thanks to you, and to everyone else. Tom's expression softened. You handled yourself with dignity and strength. That's not easy to do in the face of disrespect. Coming from you, that means a lot, Monica said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. She flushed slightly but stood her ground. Really, thank you. Tom chuckled. You don't have to thank me. It was the right thing to do. As Monica moved to continue her rounds, he called after her, Hey, if you ever want a reference for handling high-pressure situations, I'm your guy. Monica laughed, the sound easing the last of her lingering tension. I'll keep that in mind. In the back of the plane, however, Twelver remained a sullen presence. He avoided eye contact with Monica but occasionally shifted in his seat, clearly stewing. Monica decided to keep her distance, knowing she'd won by not engaging further. She wouldn't let him take up any more of her energy. As the flight approached its descent into New York, Monica felt a growing sense of pride. She thought about the challenges of her job, the unspoken biases she faced, and how easy it would be to give in to the weight of it all. But today she had risen above it, and the people around her had lifted her higher still. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking, the intercom crackled, signaling the beginning of the descent. Monica listened with half an ear, already preparing for the landing routine. As she secured the cabin for arrival, she noticed that even Twelver seemed subdued, his earlier bravado replaced by an uneasy quiet. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small victory. The plane touched down smoothly at JFK, the rumble of the landing gear a welcome sound. As the passengers began to gather their belongings, Monica positioned herself at the exit, ready to bid them farewell. She smiled warmly at each person who passed, grateful for their kindness and encouragement. When Tom Hanks reached her, he paused, extending a hand. Keep doing what you're doing, Monica. You're making a difference. Monica shook his hand, her grip firm. Thank you. Safe travels. As he disappeared into the terminal, Monica exhaled deeply. The flight had been one of the most challenging of her career, but it had also shown her the resilience she carried within herself and the power of allies in unexpected places. As she prepared to deplane, she caught James's eye. Ready for another day. James grinned. After this? Piece of cake. The cabin was quiet now, emptied of the passengers who had filled it with their chatter, laughter, and occasional tension just hours earlier. Monica walked the aisle slowly, her fingers grazing the tops of the seats as she double-checked for forgotten items. The rhythmic hum of the engines cooling down was a reminder that this flight, with all its highs and lows, was finally over. James was tidying the galley when she passed by. He flashed her a grin. You good? He asked. Monica nodded. Yeah, I think I am. He held up a lost phone charger. Last call for abandoned tech. Monica laughed softly. It's always a phone charger. As they worked together to finalize the post-flight checks, Monica felt a sense of calm beginning to settle in. The day had tested her in ways she hadn't expected, but it had also affirmed her resilience and reminded her why she loved her job despite its challenges. Once the flight crew gathered their belongings and deplaned, Monica found herself in the terminal, leaning against a pillar to catch her breath. The bright lights and steady flow of passengers were a sharp contrast to the enclosed world of the plane, but it felt grounding. She took a moment to scroll through her phone, skimming messages from her sister and a few friends, before slipping it back into her bag. Monica. She looked up to see a young woman from the flight hurrying toward her. It was the woman from 14 billion, who had spoken up against the businessman earlier. She was holding her carry-on bag with one hand and clutching a piece of paper in the other. "I hope I'm not bothering you," the woman said, slightly out of breath. "Not at all," Monica replied, surprised but smiling. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said earnestly. "Watching how you handled everything today, it was inspiring. I'm not sure I would have had your composure." Monica felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. That means a lot." The woman hesitated, then handed Monica the piece of paper. "This might sound weird, but I wrote something during the flight. Just some thoughts about what happened. I'm a journalist, and I think more people need to hear stories like yours." Monica stared at the paper, her throat tightening. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," the woman said with a smile. "Just keep being you." As the woman disappeared into the crowd, Monica carefully folded the paper and tucked it into her bag. She wasn't sure what the article might say, but the gesture alone made her feel seen in a way she hadn't expected. A few minutes later, James joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her with a wink. "Thought you might need this." "You're a lifesaver," she said, taking a grateful sip. As they walked toward the crew exit, James nudged her lightly with his elbow. "So, what's next for you tonight? Celebrating surviving the flight from hell?" Monica laughed. "I think I'm just going to go home, put on some music, and unwind. Maybe call my sister." "Sounds like a plan," James said. "Just remember you handled today like a boss." Monica smiled, the words sinking in. "Thanks, James, I appreciate that." They parted ways at the terminal exit, and Monica made her way to the rideshare pickup area. As she waited for her car, she replayed the events of the day in her mind: the businessman's cruelty, Tom Hanks's unexpected intervention, and the wave of support from the passengers. Each moment felt like a piece of a larger lesson that even in the face of ignorance and prejudice, kindness and resilience could prevail. Her phone buzzed with a new text from her sister. "Thanks for sending the money. You're the best. Love you." Monica smiled, her earlier exhaustion giving way to a quiet sense of fulfillment. She wasn't just getting by, she was making a difference, however small. Whether it was helping her sister, standing tall in the face of adversity, or simply offering a smile to a stranger, she was doing her part to make the world a little brighter. The rideshare car pulled up, and Monica slid into the back seat. As the city lights blurred past her window, she thought about Tom Hanks's parting words: "You're making a difference." For the first time in a while, she truly believed it. As the car rolled to a stop in front of her apartment building, Monica stepped out into the cool night air. She looked up at the stars, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready. Because no matter what came her way, she knew one thing for certain: she would rise to meet it with grace, strength, and the unwavering belief that she could handle anything.